Disruptivo aparece cada semana gracias a Podcastería.
Hola, ¿cómo están? Yo soy Juan del Cerro y le doy la bienvenida al podcast número 61 de Disruptivo, este programa donde semana a semana traemos historias de emprendedores de todas partes del mundo que nos cuentan pues anécdotas, historias de emprendimiento, de innovación, y así nos vamos empapando un poquito de lo que está sucediendo en el ecosistema emprendedor, no solamente en México, sino pues en muchos lugares. Y justo hoy tenemos una entrevista internacional, pero antes de hablar de la entrevista, quiero darle la bienvenida a mi co-host que nos acompaña acá en cabina, Marce Cetina. ¿Cómo estás, Marce?
Muy bien, Juan, ¿y tú cómo estás?
Muy bien, muy contento de tenerte por acá como siempre, y les recordamos que ustedes nos pueden seguir en todas las redes de la podcastería. Estamos en facebook.com/podcastería, también estamos en Twitter como @podcastería, y ahí van publicando el podcast de Disruptivo todas las semanas, además también pues de toda la barra de contenidos. Chéquennos también en iTunes, suscríbanse, es la mejor forma de seguirnos, y ya que están ahí pues déjenos un review, qué les parece el programa, es la mejor forma que tenemos para interactuar con ustedes. Les decía que hoy tenemos una entrevista internacional, como hemos tenido ya en varias ocasiones. Justo la semana pasada entrevistamos a Tia Kansara del Reino Unido, y hoy vamos a entrevistar a Steve Kraft. Ahorita él se va a presentar a fondo porque tiene un currículum muy extenso, pero Steve Kraft fue durante muchos años un estratega de la NASA. Él trabajó en el Langley Research Center y nos va a platicar un poquito acerca de lo que hacía por allá. Él desarrolló un proyecto muy interesante que fue TEDx NASA. También estuvo parte de un centro de investigación que se dedicaba a buscar las tendencias hacia el 2050. Entonces va a ser una plática bien interesante. Steve habla inglés, entonces nos vamos a pasar ahora a inglés para poder platicar con él. Pero quédense, y bueno, y si no hablan inglés, luego chequen las notas que vamos a publicar en nuestro blog, y ya ahí por ahí también les mandaremos algunos links.
Encuentra todos nuestros programas como Podcastería en iTunes.
Hi Steve, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I am very good. Thank you very much. Thanks for being part of Disruptivo. It's for us very exciting to have you with us. The audience doesn't know this, but it's very funny. Well, it's very serendipitous how you came to be with us, because I actually met your wife at a TEDx event in Canada, and talking to her, she said, "Oh, you would love to." I told her about the podcast and what is it that we did, and she said, "You're gonna love talking to my husband." And ever since, that was in I think March, we started exchanging emails, and finally we can have you here. Thank you very much for your time.
Great. Thank you.
Steve, the people that are listening to us, that you worked at NASA for over 20 years. Some of those years you were a strategist and worked in research programs talking about future trends. But I know that's just like a tiny part of your curriculum. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about your experience?
I think, going back out of college, once I graduated from University of Illinois, I got into Lockheed Skunk Works, which is a pretty famous aeronautical testing place, and I did wind tunnel testing there. And then from there, I got an offer to go to NASA Ames in California. Out there, I worked actually in the largest wind tunnel in the world. The wind tunnel is so big that you can actually put a full-size 737 in it. And then from there, I got an offer to go to NASA Langley here in Virginia, and mostly I managed wind tunnels to start with here, and then from there I went on to center operations, the overall center operations, and then like the last 6 or 7 years I spent doing strategy and innovation, which was kind of my passion at that point.
That last part of your career, I think it's something that can be very interesting for the entrepreneurs that are listening to us right now. Why is it that you find you are so passionate about it? What is it that exactly that you had to do focusing on because I mean we talk on the podcast all the time about strategy and innovation at entrepreneurial level in Mexico, but I imagine how would that be working on at NASA, and I think the idea is very exciting. Tell us a little bit about that work. Why is it that you are so passionate about it?
Well, I think one of the things is first of all, NASA does many different things beyond just space. We're involved in so many different things and so many different kinds of research. So one of the things is there's a whole big diversity of different kinds of research that you're involved in. But also, NASA in general is expected to be on the cutting edge of research now. And so when you start talking about doing strategy for NASA, you're looking 20, 25 years out, and what's going to be the cutting edge 25 years from now. And so it's much more difficult to do that than it would be to predict a strategy for a corporation. So, one of the things we have to stay on top of, and one of the things I had to do was, always be aware of all of the different types of research and new technologies and things that were coming in, and how we might benefit from those in the future.
I mean, I can imagine that, there are some things, some of these trends that we're not even, thinking about them right now outside in the Muggle world. And we're going to come back to that, to the part of the future trends, because I think that is a very interesting topic. I mean, I would love to hear some stories, some anecdotes about your work there, because like you said, NASA does a lot of things. Especially we're not even in the States, so back here in Mexico, all that we get, from NASA is, what we see in the movies and shows, and now with social media, we can get a little bit more. We follow them, but from within, what is it? I don't know. Tell us a little bit more about the dirty laundry, or what's happened. Not dirty laundry in a bad way, but what is it that happens?
Yeah. There's so many more things. So in developing lots of things for space. So first of all, NASA Langley is actually the oldest research center. It's over 100 years old. NASA's only 50 years old. So Langley's been around 50 years longer than NASA. And it was actually developed and actually established right after the Wright brothers flew in North Carolina. And it became the first aeronautical research center. So its history goes back in aeronautics primarily, not so much space. Probably every airplane ever built has been tested at NASA Langley. So they had over 40 wind tunnels. So that's the rich history that's behind Langley. But also, as we move forward, we got into lots of different types of research and types of, one of the things that they're known for is new materials, special materials. So if you're going to go to Mars and you need a special material to protect you from radiation, then you might develop that material here, or new composites for airplanes, or those kinds of things. And also there's always these spin-off things you don't hear about too much, but so for example, there was one material that we made that became used in the medical industry quite a bit, where it's kind of like a cloth that's made out of a special composite. And if you put it on a burn victim, that actually heals the burn much faster and much cleaner. So, so there's a lot of applications of our research that go beyond what we're using it.
That's amazing. It's so exciting to think so much about the technologies that are coming and, all the things that we're going to be able to do. We're already seeing, a lot of things that, one might think they're coming in the future, and that's happening now. So it's very exciting to think about what's coming next.
Yeah, the pace of change has just been incredible. It's like there's a certain amount of change that people always expect, but the pace of change is now changing. So
exactly, like I don't know, what we're seeing now is gonna be obsolete in 3 or 4 years, and
right,
to
exactly.
think about that, and it must be a real challenge to when you're trying to think about 2050. But let's come back to that later, because I want to ask you as well. You're recognized as one of the thought leaders on innovation and creativity. In thought leader, just so our audience knows, it's what we call un líder de opinión. In the book, Ready to be a Thought Leader, it tells a story of success that you had in NASA when you found that, there was not enough creativity, and that premise, it's breathtaking. How can you be the guy to, reach his hand, put his hand up and say, we're at NASA, but we're not being creative enough. But when you found that, you decided to do something, I don't want to say radical, but you decided to do something to change that, and it was actually very successful. How was it?
It's actually a really successful story. And I think, let me frame this for you a little bit. First of all, I don't want to be the guy going around telling all these, top, leading scientists and stuff that they're not creative and innovative. That's just not going to fly. It just doesn't go over very well. But the truth was that what a lot of people don't realize is NASA is part of the executive branch of government. So that means the president is our boss. And so the president sets the charter for NASA. But where there can be hiccups sometimes is the president will set a charter for what he wants us to do, but then Congress has to pass the bill for the money. So sometimes the money doesn't match what he's asking us to do. And so over the years, the last few years, there's been a lot of change in government, a lot of change in the mission of NASA, even some of the primary missions of NASA. Once the shuttles, got retired and things like that, we started looking at doing other things, doing more planetary exploration, things like that. But unfortunately, it took a while before there was a mesh between what the president wanted and what the Congress was willing to pay for. And so we were kind of in what I would call planning and replanning mode a lot. And people were spending their time, if you're trying to make a plan for what it takes to create a colony on Mars, that's not something you do overnight, not credibly anyway. So, we spent a lot of time in planning and replanning as our missions kept changing. And what I say, the way I described it for people was, I feel like some of our research scientists and engineers went into hibernation. So the creativity was still within them, but it was asleep, and I needed to wake it up again. So what I did is I created TEDx NASA. So when the TED organization decided that they were going to try this beta called TEDx, about 10 minutes after I got the email, I sent a response back saying I want a license. And, and then 10 minutes after that, I got a call from the folks at TED, and they said, "Are you kidding me? NASA wants to do one of these things?" And I said, "Yeah, I think it'd be pretty cool." My idea was that I would bring some of the great ideas that are being brought up at TED to NASA, or combine it with NASA, because we have some great problem solvers. So if you have people with big ideas or big challenges, we had people who could think about how to solve them. And there's very few things, if any, that any NASA scientist will tell you they can't do. So, that's one of the great things about the atmosphere at NASA is we have this inbred kind of culture that, we can do anything. We can figure out a way to do anything pretty much. So that was my idea, was to do two things. One was we needed to get the word out about some of the great things that NASA was doing. So a couple of the speakers were NASA speakers, but not all of them, only a few. And then I also brought in lots of other great thinkers and musicians and artists and things so that I could infuse some new ideas into the NASA people. And part of what I wanted to do as well is combine kind of the left brain and right brain activities. So we have a lot of analysts and a lot of left brain kind of scientists, but they hadn't really spent much time seeing kind of the creativity side of things and the right brain side of things. And I wanted to get them to use both sides of their brain. So doing that overall would be a good way to do that. And actually, our first TEDx NASA event in 2009, the license was for 100 people, but I got special permission and I filled a theater with 1,500 people, and we had 78,000 people online watching. And this was only like the third TEDx event, so nobody really knew what it was. And so it was pretty amazing. We had people from 10 countries watching online. And it turned out that one event did more for public service and public awareness than all of the other events we had combined.
And hi, Steve. Sorry.
Hi.
That was in 2009, right?
Yes, that was the first one, and since then there's now been 6 of them.
Okay, I was watching one of those, and it was really inspiring. I've always have seen these TEDx videos, and I've always have some I take something from the speakers. What happened next after?
Which was your favorite?
Well, I must say Greg Fraley. I think it's the one that.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah.
You probably know them by memory, right?
Yes, actually they're all friends of mine now. I mean, we became friends because we worked together. So.
It was really inspiring for me because actually, well, what he says about the heart, that you have to give the heart and you have to have certain tools for being creative. And that doesn't come just alone. You have to actually love what you are doing. So it's like, those are the things that actually I love the most. But what happens with the people in NASA that watch all these TEDx talks? What happened next? What was the result of this program?
I have to tell you a funny story. So when I did TEDx NASA, I intentionally did not tell anybody who would be speaking. I did not give out. I just said, I gave hints. I would say, the leading so-and-so person from here, or an artist from there, but I wouldn't say exactly who it was. So people knew I had really good people coming in, but they didn't know exactly who, and they also didn't know the schedule. So what that forced people to do, so what I was hearing from people was that they only wanted to come for the technical talks, or they only wanted to come to hear so-and-so. So what this forced them to do was to come for the whole day. And the response, so before I had the event, I must have got 100 emails from people about, tell me when it's going to be. I only want to come for an hour. And I kept telling them, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. When I got done with the event, I got responses back from almost every single one of those people saying, I am so glad I stayed for the whole day. And a couple of people said, I had a cab waiting for me because I thought I was only going to be there 2 hours. I told the cab to go away because I just had to stay for the whole day, So So it was really interesting to see that, in their minds, they thought they would only be interested in certain things. But once I introduced them to some new things, they really got engaged. We had 23 speakers that day, and only 3 of them were NASA.
And you know what? You create an experience for them. That's something really, really important because when you're talking about innovation, when you're talking about being creative, being a person that's going to innovate, you cannot have, you cannot be inspired only by the things that you do all the time. You have to be inspired by others because artists and singers and I don't know, like all the people. I never thought I would be inspired by a TEDx program of NASA. You know what I mean?
And I think, one of the payoffs, just to give you another quick story, is, so for example, by getting some of the scientists to see some other things, we had one guy who figured out that he was teaching himself Beethoven at home on his own time, playing the piano, and he figured out that he could change his program that he was writing for NASA based on how he was learning Beethoven. And this was a program to reduce the amount of dynamics, the amount of shaking that happens in a rocket when it first takes off. And so he actually wrote a program based on how he learned Beethoven.
That's something amazing.
And it was an award-winning program.
That's how the inspiration comes.
That's why I say there was a lot of success stories out of this. I'll tell you one more, and then I'll probably have to move on. But I had one guy who was a truck driver. He said he had been up all night driving, but he had heard about the event. He came in. He had 3 kids. And he was an alcoholic. And he said, after this event today, I have made a determination that I will quit drinking and I'm going to send all 3 of my kids through college. And so it wasn't just the NASA people, it was inspiration all the way around for all of the different possibilities. And it was at a time in 2009, our economy was dropping and people were kind of in a bad mood. There was kind of a recession going on. And so it was a perfect time to bring in kind of these uplifting new ideas.
Steve, I think we can all relate to, being when you're so in an organization and you're in the day-to-day, it's so busy, you get, especially when you're an entrepreneur or you're working, on an organization so demanding. I mean, it's very easy to get stuck on your everyday stuff and your projects because they're exciting and you're very motivated, but being stuck on that and being only looking inside, it's what I think prevents sometimes creativity, like you were saying, and it actually can stop.
We didn't want people to be stuck in their cubicles, kind of just doing their own thing and not see what's available outside of that.
Because from what we're learning from your talk is that it doesn't matter if you're a social entrepreneur trying to simplify the way people move on a city, or if you are trying to discover new technology and develop a new way to fly, or simpler materials that will allow us to move faster. It doesn't matter on what level you are. If you just keep your eyes and your mind inside of your organization and on your own workshop, you're gonna get stuck. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges for entrepreneurs when thinking about the future. And that's where I want to take the conversation now to the next question. You told us that you devoted yourself on some time on NASA, and now as a consultant as well, you're always talking and you're always working on future trends. That idea is very interesting to me. How do you think an entrepreneur can start looking for and find future trends like that? Thinking about 2050, 2025, and how can we prepare for that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different things that we can do to kind of set up people for that. So, every day I am reading stuff constantly, so I have feeds that I get, through the internet or whatever. Find some reliable sources for information that is within whatever field you want to develop, but also a couple outliers that are just totally different things that aren't necessarily in your field. And just every day kind of keep up on that. And what you'll learn over time is that you'll start making connections with things. Keep up with the future trends, keep up with like the newest technologies coming out. How do 3D printers play with something over here? Or, what's a new material and how it can be used? And, they're thinking about using this material over here, but I could use it in my project over here. So, I think another thing is kind of what you alluded to before that I always encourage is, if you have a group of 4 or 5 people that are all kind of staying on top of these different trends and things, and then you get together and you just kind of have a conversation, especially if the people have some kind of diverse background. Like you may all have the same goal of doing some social good somewhere, but you have diverse backgrounds. And when you bring those diverse backgrounds in, and you combine that and you start brainstorming, you're like, how is, the fact that quantum computers are going to change the world in terms of artificial intelligence, how is that going to affect my field? The fact that there's not going to be any fresh water available, in my part of the country, how does that change what I want to do? So, it's really looking at and kind of doing what if scenarios where the technologies can connect. And so one of the things is it's really, really difficult to take all these different things and combine them and come up with, some kind of a future strategy. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I'm not sure which, my wife, which you met, pointed out to me one time. I was coming home, I was frustrated at work because I saw some visions of where we should go, and I was trying to communicate that to senior staff, and I wasn't doing a very good job, and I felt like, they just weren't getting it, et cetera. And she turned to me and she said, Steve, you're one of the unique people who can take all of these really crazy, unique, weird ideas that are really future out there, and you can see exactly how they're all going to fit together in 20 years. I said, yeah. I said, doesn't everybody do that?
Of course, we were just talking about that in lunch.
My frustration was I really thought that everybody could do that. And so I'm thinking, what's wrong? What am I saying that's wrong? Because people weren't seeing what I was seeing. So it actually took my wife to point that out. So
that's awesome. I would love to ask you, this is a very, just out of curiosity, thinking back, 6-7 years when you were doing this kind of work in NASA, what was one trend that you hit the spot that you said, this is going to be a thing in 2015 or in 2014 or in 2016, and that it's happening now? Could you tell us one thing you were, one of the first? It doesn't matter if you were the first one, but you were there saying, we should pay attention to this.
Well, there's a couple. Nuclear fusion is one. We were looking at alternative energy sources for, long-distance planetary exploration or going outside the solar system, et cetera. Nuclear fusion is a type of energy where instead of like fission, nuclear fission, which is what the nuclear plants are now, that have these crazy consequences if something goes wrong, the only outcome of the only materials that are let off in nuclear fusion is like water vapor. So it's very safe. It's like an unlimited supply if you get it to work right. And over the last 20 years, people have been working on it and not had a lot of success in making it consistent. And I think that was the thing is now we're starting to see evidence of some experiments where we can consistently produce nuclear fusion. And that's going to change the world because you kind of think of it in the United States anyway. When I think about somebody building a house, they put in their heater, they put in their air conditioner, and right alongside that, they could have a very small nuclear fusion device that powers their house, and they don't have to be on the grid. So, there's no reason to have the infrastructure of all the electricity because everybody will have their own power. And it could be in the future, 20 years from now, which is where I'm always thinking, it could be scaled down to be in a cell phone, So it's gonna really change, our dependence on any kind of energy.
That sounds really like out of this world for me.
It's amazing. I can imagine. I can just dream about having a job like yours, which is thinking about what's coming and thinking about that.
Yeah.
So because just from hearing you now, it's like saying, I'm thinking about when solar energy is going to be obsolete. It kind of feels like that.
Right. So it'll be so much more efficient than what it is now. So we only capture a very small percentage of solar energy, for example, but we've now come up with some new designs for solar arrays and stuff that is, 50 or 60% more efficient than what we have today. And that's going to make a huge difference in terms of how much power you create through solar energy. So I talked about before, like water being an issue. If you could create desalination plants that were powered by solar energy 20 years from now, we are still the blue planet, but only 3% of the blue planet is fresh water. So we need to find a way to change the ocean into fresh water. So desalination plants that run on solar energy could be something that's feasible. Right now, it's not feasible because they need so much power.
I have to ask you one thing. I've always done these things that you said, like thinking about what other areas are thinking about and what other areas are seeing, and so I can like have more information about what's going on outside the social part or outside education. What I really would like to know is if there is a special technique that you have for being more creative. Like you have so much inspiration from others, but besides having information from other areas, is there a special thing that we can do for being more creative with all this information that we have? Or
one of the things I was responsible for when I was doing creativity and innovation, there are a lot of companies out there that claim that they can come in and help you become more creative. And what we found was they would come in and do a workshop, and it'd be a fun day and everything, but it wouldn't be a lasting thing. It would only be, a couple of days, and then people would forget about it, and it wouldn't be a lasting thing. Also, a lot of times what they were doing was not really based on science. It was just, something that they were having fun with, basically. So what I had to do in order to sell the idea of teaching scientists creativity, I had to actually go in and research the brain and the chemicals in the brain and what affects creativity, and at a molecular level, what's happening, the different sounds, the different smells affect creativity. So we actually started teaching a course called Enhancing Your Creative Genius that was based on the research that we did, because we couldn't find anybody that provided a service that would stand up to the scientists and engineers at NASA. So we actually took it to a very deep level, did a lot of research on it. And I don't know if we have time to go into all the details of all that, but
can we?
So if you start looking up creativity, I would say, don't look at all the little fun workshops and things like that. Look at really what's the science behind it. What's the basis of what happens? What kind of atmosphere is created when you're being creative, or what do you need to create in order to be creative? What kind of atmosphere do you need to create, or environment do you need to create to be creative? And I think there's a lot of information on that. It's just that people don't typically use it in the way it needs to be used.
Can you give us like one link where we can like find some of this information? Perhaps like we can post it in social media.
What I'll do is I'll send something, because I don't have one out of my head, but certainly could send you a couple links on some things like that. Yeah,
that would be really nice. Thank you very much.
That is excellent, Steve. And we would love to keep talking, because I find these these things and innovation and everything that we're talking about so interesting. But unfortunately, we have to wrap it up, because our program is unfortunately very, very short. But we want to thank you a lot. We want to thank you very, very much here in Disruptivo. It's a very interesting talk we've had today. We hope that we can keep our conversation going. We can exchange some more information, so we can share it with the people that are listening to us, and that want more from you. Where can we find you? Where can our audience contact you? Are you on Twitter, on Facebook? What social network are you in?
So my company is called Strategy Man LLC. I'm on Twitter just called @StrategyMan is my Twitter handle, and I'm on Facebook and on LinkedIn. My email is steve@strategyman.com.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Steve. Well, with this, we want to, thank you very much. Say goodbye. Okay. We have to wrap it up over here. But we'll continue the conversation. And, thank you very much. Great hug for you and your wife all the way up to Virginia.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Escuchas Podcastería.
Nosotros regresamos aquí a la cabina. Muy interesante la conversación con Steve Kraft, estratega de la NASA, quien pues ya nos contó un poquito de las tendencias que se vienen a futuro. Seguiremos la conversación con él y ya les diremos cómo encontrarlo. Sigan nuestras redes sociales y nuestros links. Nosotros ya nos vamos, pero queremos recordarles que en Disruptivo tenemos un convenio con Uber y pues si ustedes entran a la aplicación de este nuevo transporte, esta nueva plataforma de transporte en la ciudad y meten el código Disruptivo, tendrán hasta 2 viajes gratis de 150 pesos para usuarios nuevos.
Entonces, ¿tú vienes por mí?
Claro, ¿dónde está tu casa?
En Xochimilco.
Lejos ya no existe. Uber no es una compañía de transporte, es tecnología. Uber, el conductor privado de todos.
Muchísimas gracias a todos. Nosotros seguimos aquí en la podcastería. Les recordamos que nos pueden seguir en las redes sociales de Disruptivo también. Estamos en @DisruptivoMX en Twitter, @DisruptivoMX en Facebook. Nos pueden escuchar en iTunes. Sobre todo, suscríbanse, por favor. Eso es, nos ayuda a impulsar mucho este programa, a llegar a mucha más gente. Además, nos encuentran en SoundCloud y en Mixcloud también. Le quiero dar las gracias a Marce Cetina, que nos acompaña como todas las semanas. Y antes de irnos, Marce nos va a decir cuál es el evento que no se pueden perder esta semana.
Hoy, este evento más bien va a ser hasta la siguiente, pero este lunes 13 de julio tienen que registrarse para el Creative Mornings si es que quieren ir, porque se están acabando los boletos. Entonces métanse a creativemornings.com si es que quieren asistir al evento del 17 de julio.
Buenísimo. Muchísimas gracias, Marce. ¿Dónde te podemos encontrar para que nos cuentes todos los eventos que hay?
Me pueden encontrar en Facebook como Marce Cetina y en Twitter como Marce Patch.
Buenísimo, a mí me encuentran como @delcerrojuan en Twitter. Nosotros nos seguimos hablando y nos escuchamos la próxima semana. Hasta luego.
Esta fue una presentación de Podcastería.